a Tuesday, and the house had the stale scent of boiled rice and detergent. The clock hummed like a patient mosquito on the kitchen wall. Elias fastened his cufflinks with the same delicate precision he used on patient charts. Thumb, index finger, a private geometry. Then set his glass in the exact ring of condensation it left on the table every evening, a perfect archive of absence. He didn't look at me when he asked if I'd be late. "I might walk," I said. He nodded, calculated a reply, decided against it. With Elias, love was a ledger balanced each morning and closed by night. He never overpaid. Outside, autumn sagged into itself, and the fog from the lake crept up the streets like a soft animal, laying its head on our small town shoulder. The leaves had turned the color of old wounds, amber, bruised purple, papery rust, and the streetlights made halos over puddles. When I opened the door, the chill touched the hollow beneath my throat and stayed there, a hand that could not decide whether to choke or comfort. Our neighbors had already drawn their curtains. The houses sat like closed mouths. In the distance, the lake exhaled, and a gull stitched the air with a sharp cry, a needle pulling at the fading light. I zipped my coat and walked toward the shoreline, toward the same old bench and the same old path where weeds rose through gravel like the spines of an animal that refused to die. I walked most nights, not for fitness, not for clarity, for the honest discomfort of the air in my lungs, for the witness of headlights gliding slowly along the road above the bluff, stretched thin like veins under translucent skin, for the way the wind carried voices and thinned them until they sounded like mine. When we married, Elias had taken my hands as if I were an instrument, fragile, precise, to be kept in a case. Our vows were beautiful, measured. He promised to shelter me from storms, but the storms were the only times I felt alive. He promised to be steadfast, and he was. He never left. That was the worst of it. He stayed like weathered furniture, like wallpaper, like something that long ago chose its color and had no reason to change. If I asked for a story, he gave me facts. If I asked for a kiss, he gave me sleep. Even the word love made him blink, recalibrating. He blamed the hospital, the hours, the bodies that asked more of him than I did. I didn't tell him that he was the safest place to hide from myself because he did not interrogate beauty or sorrow. He only measured. He did not touch the dark corners. He didn't ask what I dreamed of at night when the window rattled and the radiator whistled like a buried train. Down at the lake, a small lamp sputtered above the maintenance shed, its cone of light tilting and straightening in the wind. The path smelled like wet cedar and river stones. The fog made halos of my breath. I counted my steps to avoid counting anything else. 50 to the bend, 10 more to the bench with the carved initials. I sat where I always sat, facing the water, hands stuffed into my sleeves. The benches were slick, the wooden slats slick as a tongue. I told no one, because there was no one to tell, that I had begun to hear my name in the lake's small chewing at the shore. Siren, said the sibilance of water on pebbles. Siren, the reeds sighed, the way a mother calls a child from play. I knew it was imagination, hunger reshaped by wind. But once you accept that the world can be fed by your longing, you begin to hear it everywhere. The first night I saw him, he was not romantic or tragic. He was nothing as neat as that. A man, too thin, standing under the lamp by the shed, hands in his pockets, his hood up so the face was a cut of shadow. Another night he stood by the water line, and the lake rose into his ankles. He seemed to lean on the fog itself. When a car passed on the road above, he lifted his face as if to memorize the lights. 2 slow comets, then dropped it again, unseen. I did not look at him. We were the kind of strangers who learned each other's presence the way you learn the shape of a bruise beneath your shirt. You don't need to see it. You feel it. Still, something about the angle of his shoulders, the quiet tension of his stance, the way he seemed to absorb the cold and turn it inward, made me think of a violin with a broken string. Not silent, just different, and dangerous if you didn't know what you were doing. He came nights after that. Realized, perhaps, that I came too. For a while we orbited the bench and the shed like 2 satellites avoiding collision. We did not speak. Once, a gust shook the long grasses beside the water and he stepped closer to the lamplight. His face. No, not handsome in any simple way. The nose slightly crooked, a scar that caught the light at his cheekbone, a pale river cutting through shadow. Eyes that had a kind of sleep in them. Not the sleep of peace. The sleep of someone who has not closed his eyes for too long and does not trust what will happen if he lets the darkness find him. On the 4th night, he said something. The going phrase was small and unremarkable. You always sit there. I did not answer at first. I studied the lamplight on the wet boards, the moths spinning around the glass like ash in a jar. Behind us, the town inhaled, exhaled, moved on. Yes, I said. He seemed equally astonished by my voice, and his. Do you live nearby? Yes. Do you come for the quiet? No, I said, before the truth could be too ashamed to arrive. I come because the quiet listens. He turned his head like a dog that hears a whistle. For a moment, wind lifted his hood, and light uncovered a fragment of his expression. A little amused, more than a little hurt, the way all wounded animals are, even when there's no blood to show. That's not a safe thing to say in a town this small. It's not a safe town, I said, surprising myself. That's truer than you think. He drifted away, stood by the water again, and I watched the line of him become part of the fog and then not. When I left, he did not follow. When I looked back from the top of the path, the lamp stuttered, and he had already dissolved into the thin light. I walked home with my wrists feeling like someone else's, narrower, more breakable, and a small, bright ache present beneath my ribs like a shard I had swallowed without water. Elias was in bed, asleep on his back, the sheet drawn to his waist as if someone had measured the distance and folded it to standard. I lay beside him and studied the ceiling where the headlights made slow rivers across the plaster. His breathing was regular. My own was not. I thought of the stranger's voice, not the words, the tone, cigarette paper thin, the underside of something that used to be a scream. I could taste rain even though I was inside. I lay awake, waiting for it to begin. It didn't. The real storm would wait for us to sleep a little. It was considerate that way. On Thursday, at the office, I indexed invoices and answered emails and said, "Of course," and "I understand," and "We'll handle that." I was very good at making handles for heavy things other people did not want to carry. When Lisa from accounting asked if I'd tried the new cafe, I described a latte as if it were an act of mercy. Sometime around noon, my phone buzzed with a single text from Elias. Dinner at 8? No greeting, no endearment. An invitation addressed to an address. Of course, I replied. When dusk arrived, thin as a scarf, I walked again. It had rained midday, brief and deliberate, and now a scent like clean pennies rose from the pavement. The lamp by the shed flickered before finding its strength. He was there, a little farther down the shore. I walked toward him, deciding only as I moved that I would. Do you come here every night? I asked. He studied the water. Most. It's a kind of border. Between what and what? Between who I was and what's coming. Is there no who you are now? I asked. He laughed, and it startled the gulls. That's the dangerous part. The present. He turned then, an unexpected generosity, as if allowing me to see him fully might right some balance neither of us understood. The scar did not make him grim. It made him honest. His hair hung wet. His eyes were the kind that have a horizon behind them. He had the look of a person who had lived many nights with only headlights for a clock. I'm Riven, he said. The name felt like a secret and a half-confession. I said, Seren? He repeated it once, not for correctness, but because the sound had struck him the way pebbles strike the lake when you throw them to count the rings. Seren. We did not shake hands. The air between us seemed to refuse the formality. He nodded toward the town behind us. You live with someone? Yes. Husband? Yes. He watched the water again with a small concentration, as if he was tracking distant boats only he could see. Is he kind? Yes, I said, surprised at how much the word resisted. He tries to be. It only gets as far as the surface. He smiled without pleasure. Surfaces are where drowning looks like swimming. And then, for no reason except everything, I told him a little, the minimal truth. That Elias was a good man, but not the right listener. That we had lasted almost 5 years on routine and clean floors and the noble politeness of exhaustion. That sometimes I woke at 3 a.m. because the silence in our house had sat on my chest, and I could not draw breath until I walked to the kitchen and drank water until I was almost full of air. Riven listened as if the story did not belong to gossip but to weather. He made no sound while I spoke. When I finished, he said, I won't follow you home. The statement sat strangely between threat and protection. I didn't ask you to. I know, he said. He looked at me then, full on, and it was like stepping from a hallway into a room with windows. I'm trying to be careful with what's left of me. Is there danger? I asked, only half aware of what I meant. Yes. He didn't elaborate, but the words seemed to knock something in the darkness, and I felt the echo long into the night. In lieu of detail, he offered a courtesy. He turned his face toward the lamp again and let me read the scar, the way you read a lake's gloss for wind. History lived there, not in the mark itself, but in the unremarked way his jaw clenched around it, his cheek going tense under light like a muscle concentrating on not remembering. We did not meet the next night, and yet we did, both of us arriving in the same place without the other as if faith, some small, unreliable faith, could summon. A third evening, a fourth, each time without plan. We learned each other sideways. He told me the names of birds by their silhouettes. I told him how, as a girl, I used to lie on the dock and let the lake rock me until I thought my bones might float out of me like driftwood. He told me about a city I had never been to where the neon lights in the rain made a sound. He told me nothing of himself directly and everything in the way he watched the fog thicken like an approaching truth. One night, headlights moved slowly along the road above us. A car paused at the turn. Riven fell quiet. He made a small motion with 2 fingers, the way you tell a bird not to startle. The car idled, reversed, then moved on. Only then did he breathe fully again. The breath seemed to start at his shoulders and travel through him like a wave that took all the shore with it. Do you owe someone? I asked. He smiled, but it was not consolation. Some debts pay themselves by collecting. I don't understand. Good, he said. It's safer. He turned so his back was to the lake, and the lamplight made blue coins of his eyelashes. The fog felt closer. The reeds clicked together softly like fingernails on glass. If there's anything I want to give you, he said, it's distance from what follows me. What follows you? His eyes moved past me, up the path, and something in the movement of his gaze made me want to take his hand, the way you take a child's at a street crossing. Not to possess, but to anchor. Men who think the world is a door you can kick in, he said quietly. Does Elias know you come here? No. He wouldn't like it. I'm not sure he would notice. He made a sound that could have been laughter or sorrow shaved down to a blade. Notice is an intimacy. We were careful with time. I left before it grew too late, before he could become more than a man under a lamp. I walked home along the road, and sometimes he walked to the bend and watched, a guard at the small ceremony of my turning away. It is strange how quickly a life outside your own life can take root. With him, my breath belonged to me again. A lazy pulse woke in my wrists. When he did not come, the lake had another flavor, another absence I could taste and name. When Elias asked if I was tired at dinner, I smiled and said no. When Elias asked if I could pick up dry cleaning, I said yes. I only told lies about time. Not about where I went, but about what I was doing inside it. You can live a double life if you make the second life quiet. The quiet hides things in the fold of itself. On the night the fog came low and heavy like wool over a sleeping face, Riven arrived late, a shadow becoming body only when he moved. His jacket was darker than the dark. He stood close to the bench and leaned down for a long time, both hands on his knees, catching his breath as if he'd run from the hungry part of the town. What happened? I asked. He shook his head. He did not look at me. When he raised his hands to his hair, they trembled. Nothing, he said, but the word felt like a door shut too fast. Riven. Seren. He finally looked up, and his face was an animal's face, edged and wary, less arranged for speech than for survival. You can't be here. You said that before. I meant it before. I mean it more now. He listened, tilting his head the way men do when they are reading silence. From the road, a slow car passed. He stepped slightly into me as if the light might leave fingerprints on him. The space between us shrank to one breath. Tell me, I said quietly. You told me there was danger. The word is smaller than the fact, he said. I did a thing once. He smiled, then killed it. More than once. It was my way of moving through the world. Get there first. Push before you can be pushed. I said yes to wolves and believed that made me one. Turns out, a man can learn to walk with a pack and still be prey. What did you do? I asked. Though all the stories we tell about men like him are too neat for real life, and I knew what he did was not a single act, but a way of breathing. Something went wrong, he said. Someone got hurt who wasn't meant to. Money touched blood, and men I'd known half my life found it easy to look at me as if I were math. If you're math, you can be added or subtracted. If you're an animal, you can be hunted. They decided I was both. Who are they? You know their type. He looked toward the town, where a siren might be winking far away. They stand in rooms with no windows and think there's nothing outside. He stepped back, took in a breath that did not belong to fear so much as fatigue. I shouldn't have talked to you. I shouldn't have let it happen. You are. He gestured to the lake, then the fog, then the lamp, as if each could stand in for a word he could not even risk using. Good. The part of me that is not broken recognizes it. The other parts will ruin it if I stay. Don't go, I said. The words surprised me. They felt as simple and unadorned as bread. Seren. I said don't go, I repeated softly, not as a command, as a petition. He looked at his shoes, and when he spoke again, his voice had changed, the way voices do when grief enters them and sits down. I don't want to make your life a shape that ends with a black car and men who smell like knives. Is that what follows you? He did not answer. Instead, he did the strangest, gentle thing. He lifted his hand as if he might touch my cheek, but he did not touch. His palm hovered just above the skin. The heat of it, the little current of warmth in the chilled air, went through me like a wire carrying all my hidden electricity. My eyes closed. I have never been touched so cleanly by a hand that never arrived. Go home, he said. If you love me even a little, go home. We did not speak of love. He had smuggled the word into that sentence like a delicate contraband and pretended he hadn't. I opened my eyes. The fog gathered at the edges of his hood like wool about to burn. All right, I said. But tomorrow I won't be here. He left long before I did. The lamp threw his shadow sideways and then took it back. I sat until the cold made my cheeks numb and the damp crept into my knees. At home, Elias was still awake, reading an article on the harmful effects of blue light with his phone almost in his face. He lowered the brightness when I entered, a small formality in a marriage built of small formalities. You're late, he said. I know. I warmed up the stew. Thank you. We ate like tourists in a museum, looking without touching. Elias told me about a patient who had lied on an intake form. He appreciated honesty. He respected boundaries. He believed lives could be repaired by schedule and good lighting. When I washed the bowls, the ceramic clinked like a bell, and I thought, if a man says the word love only to himself, does the room hear it? The next day at work, I opened the supply closet to find a dozen blank notebooks and felt a ridiculous urge to take one and begin writing the entire story of my life so the object would not be blank any longer. I did not choose a notebook. Instead, I took a pen and quietly placed it in my pocket like a promise I couldn't keep. That evening, rain came with intention. It arrived in a gray sheet that made the world look as if someone had painted over it and left to smoke a cigarette. The lake dissolved into itself, shore into water into fog. I went anyway, because of course I did, because stubbornness is how the heart keeps from starving. He wasn't there. The lamp hissed, flickered, steadied. The reeds leaned like old men listening for something they no longer could hear. I waited long enough for my hair to slick to my cheeks and my socks to sponge inside my boots. And then I waited longer. When I finally stood to leave, there was a small shape on the bench under an empty bottle of mineral water, the plastic glistening with rain. I lifted it and found a folded piece of paper beneath, pressed flat but already softening. I didn't open it until I was under the awning of the maintenance shed. The note was written in a neat, almost careful hand that formed each letter as if afraid of tearing the page. Seren, if I owe anyone anything now, it's you, and what I owe is distance. The men who followed me once are following again. There are places I can go where that matters less than it would here. Please don't come looking. It will hurt less if we stop the story before the worst part. The rain blurred the ink at the last letter. I read it again as if another meaning might appear. On the third reading, I laughed, quietly, without joy, at the phrase, "It will hurt less." I knew then he didn't understand me at all, or understood me too well. The hurt was already the shape I had chosen. Either way, my feet were moving before my head was ready. I slipped the note into my coat and walked to the road. I did not go home. I sent Elias a message. Staying late. Don't wait. I added a small heart because I meant it. I loved that simple, reliable man in the way you love a door that never fails to open for you, even when your home is no longer your own. It felt like placing a candle outside a church I no longer entered. I did what you do when you are a woman in a small town in autumn and you want to follow a man into a problem. I went to places where men like him might go. The bus station with its vending machines and stale coffee smell. The 24-hour laundromat where the humming of machines made a soft, metallic hymn. The gas station on the highway where truck drivers posted long, soft paragraphs of silence with their eyes. The fog made every face the same. The rain drew a veil over recognition. I did not see him. At 1 a.m, I returned to the lake and sat on the bench where his letter had lived. The lamp buzzed. A moth fluttered inside it like a lit confession. I watched the path. No one came. The next day, I made a decision as small as a paper cut, and it bled everywhere. I called in sick. My voice was hoarse from lake air and grief's wool in my throat, and so the lie was easier to believe. I packed a small bag, boots, sweaters, the notebook I hadn't taken the day before, but now stole from the office supply closet. Without being dramatic, I placed my wedding ring in a clean teacup on the counter, like a coin offering to an honest God. Then, in a fit of practicality, because love looks ridiculous without small domestic gestures, I wrote Elias a note he could file. Taking a few days. I need air. I'm safe. Don't call Elias would interpret I'm safe as the most important part. He would not ask safe from what? He would call anyway. Later. I went back to the lake at noon, foolishly hoping the daylight would make him less gone. Brightness only sharpened absence. I found a man who sold bait from a van near the parking lot. The kind of man who has seen every delicate private ceremony the town pretended not to have. I bought a soda I didn't want and asked if he'd seen a guy with a scar under the lamp at night. The man squinted. "Lot of guys under lamps," he said. "This one doesn't own a boat," I said. He grinned. "Then he's either borrowing one or he's running." "Running where?" He shrugged. "Away," he said, then softened. "Bus went north last night. 2 a.m. That's the one that stops by the mill and goes out toward the next county." He could have taken that. Or not. He didn't ask why I needed to know. He bent and rearranged glittering lures in a bin as if they were pieces in a puzzle that ended with fish. That night, I took the bus north. It was the kind of coach whose seats smelled like other people's decisions. A little mold, a little cheap cologne, the chemical apple of a cleaning product that refuses to convince the air it knows better. The driver nodded at me, tired in the way men are when their lives are made of roads and patience. We pulled away from the station like a ship leaving a pier no one saw. Outside, the rain was constant but gentle, like a carefully administered anesthesia. Streetlights cleaved themselves in two on the wet pavement. On the last curve before the highway, I saw a figure standing under a broken billboard, hood up, hands in pockets. He didn't look up. He was looking at the road, not the bus. He was not waiting. He was calculating. And then something else happened. Not in the real world, because that's never the place, but in the world behind my ribs. I knew. I knew he hadn't gone far. I knew he would not leave the lake cleanly, People like him remove themselves from a map the way you pull up a nail, slowly, with a careful rocking that creaks. I got off at the next stop. The driver didn't. The night was a hand over my eyes, and I let it lead me back to the path. I took a ride share, asked the driver to leave me by the boat rental shack near the lake. He asked if I was sure. I said yes. He hesitated in that way men do when they understand that what might happen to a woman at night is more than their tip can carry. I thanked him too much. I stepped out into the wet dark. There are stories people tell about how they found what they were looking for. None of them apply. I simply walked. My feet knew the route. My lungs knew the weather. I followed not a sound, but the absence of sound, the way silence gathers around a body. I moved beyond the maintenance shed, past the last lamp, into reeds taller than my shoulder where the path narrowed. My boots sank. Water lapped the laces with small teeth. The town withdrew like a parent who cannot look at a grown child's face because they see the one they knew has gone. He was there. Of course he was. Under the shelter of an empty boathouse, sitting on a crate, elbows on his knees, looking at the shape of the lake as it returned itself over and over to the shore. He stood when he saw me, and it was like a deer flinching and not running. The knife blade of alarm flashed in his eyes and was gone, replaced by something I had not expected to ever be given by him. Relief so profound it took a full second to exhale. No, he said, equal parts prayer and warning. Yes, I said. My coat was soaked through. I pushed back my hood. The rain wrote careful, tiny scriptures up and down my hair. You shouldn't have come. I know. I left because... I know, I said, and there was nothing angry in me, only an insistence that felt almost holy. If you leave without a word, you don't have to watch my face. You do realize I would have let you go, don't you? I would have let you if you'd asked. But you left me with a note that turned me into an afterthought, and I happened to be... I half laughed, because how else do you say it? Difficult. He ran both hands over his face, the way you erase something on a fogged window. He tried again with words, and they came out transparent. You're a good person. That's not a shield, I said. It's a target. He nodded. I know. Then don't make me wear it alone. He closed his eyes, breathing. The lake breathed. The boathouse settled. Somewhere far across the water, a train moved slowly, its horn a long animal sorrow cutting the fog in forgivable pieces. I don't want to be the reason your life burns, he said, finally. Why assume it won't? I said. Even if I go home? Maybe this is the only fire I get to choose. His jaw worked, a small muscle at the corner trying to make an argument out of pain. He leaned one shoulder against one of the boathouse posts. The wood groaned softly, an old spine. When I was a kid, he said, I knew men who taught me how to leave a room without anyone noticing. You go quiet. You make your steps like a cat. You walk some of yourself out first, then the rest. You don't close doors. You don't look back. It's the looking that tells on you. You looked, I said. Yes, he said, with a small lopsided smile. I did. His hand, this time, did not hover. He touched my wet hair and pushed it behind my ear. The tenderness was so plain I almost flinched. There was nothing performative in it. Just this. His skin on mine, brief, inadequate, not enough. Not even a promise. A proof. Come with me, he said, and the words were a bruise and a cure. I went. We left the boathouse by its back door, ducking beneath the low-beamed roof, the boards complaining softly. We walked along the edge where the reeds were thinner, toward a dirt lot, where an old sedan sat sullenly under trees. The car had a dent in its back quarter and a license plate that looked borrowed. The air smelled like cold metal and wet bark. Riven opened my door like a man who believes that if he gets the rituals right, the gods might let him pass. Inside, the car's heater tried to live. Our wet clothes steamed a little. He watched the mirror more than the windshield as we pulled onto the service road. They've got guys who watch the highway. They won't look here right away if they're smart. They're not always smart. You're smart, I said. Smart's just another word for scared in the right direction. We drove through streets that had all removed their faces for the night. The lake receded behind us, then appeared on our left again, a dark glass. The only light came from houses that stayed awake on purpose. In one, a woman smoked on a back step, the smoke rising like a thread asking for a needle. In another, a man stood in a kitchen and touched the top of a doorframe, some private ritual. The world contained multitudes of loneliness, each an exact species, and ours had found one another in the wild. I left a note for my husband, I said. He swallowed, as if the word husband were a mouthful of something bitter. Will he will keep breathing, I said. He's good at that. I'm sorry, he said. I am too. For both of us, he looked at me sidelong. We can turn around. We can't, I said, and neither of us asked why we agreed on that. We drove toward the highway, but when he saw the ramp, he shook his head, eyes flicking left, right, left, the way a man watches for deer. They'll be waiting on the main roads. We cut through the old mill and take the farm route. It adds time. It reduces bullets. Bullets, I repeated softly, the way you repeat a word to learn if it has always sounded like that. How many? He made a face that tried to be a smile and got stuck halfway. Enough. Rain persisted. The wipers offered their tired metronome. Headlights approached like distant thought and slid past, momentary examinations that decided we weren't their business. My heart lived in my throat for longer than hearts are meant to, and when I finally swallowed it back down, it felt bruised. Tell me something not about violence, I said. Tell me the kind of thing you would tell me if we were different people on a different night going to a different kind of life. He nodded, once. Considered. When I was 7, my mother taught me to tie my shoes by telling me a story about rabbits and holes. The loops were ears. The knot was a burrow. I remember the feel of her fingers, how sure they were. I can still tie by feel in the dark. And when you were 10? I asked, because this had become a kind of prayer. I knew every place in our neighborhood where a person could hide for 2 minutes and breathe. Behind the bakery, under the stairs of the parish hall, in the scaffolding of a new building if you held still. And now I can take a car apart with a wrench from a thrift store and put it back together fast enough that if someone was pointing a gun at me during the middle, they'd think the car had always been in pieces. I let the silence sit with us. It had earned its own seat. What about you? He asked. When I was 6, I thought the lake could swallow sadness if I told it properly. I whispered my secrets into cupped hands and opened them to the water, like releasing minnows. At 13, I found out it doesn't work that way. At 13, he said, I learned that some men don't kill because they want to, but because they believe it solves a problem. At 20, I said, I mistook admiration for love. At 21, he said, I mistook fear for loyalty. We turned off the main road. The farm sloped away to the right, fields slick, fences shining. The rain turned to drips, then to fog again, the world reconsidering itself. He drove with both hands, and the kind of patience I recognized from the lake, the patience of creatures who know they cannot outpace what wants them. Before dawn, we stopped at a truck stop gargantuan enough to feel like a town's ghost. The windows steamed from the inside. The coffee was brown enough to make a sermon. He found a back booth with a view of the lot. Two truckers in hats read menus as if they had never seen English before. A waitress in a pink polo wrote down our order without looking up from her pad, her pencil making a dry, scratching sound that reminded me of mice in attics. We spoke in low voices, not because we were afraid of being heard, because the air itself asked for quiet. He told me nothing useful and everything necessary. He slept sometimes behind a warehouse where the trucks idled for hours. He carried cash stitched into the lining of his jacket. He trusted no cards and fewer people. He had once been part of a crew that took what it wanted from places that insured themselves against loss. After a while, he said, I stopped believing that things belonged to anyone. It was all just inventory moving between hands. Then one night, a kid stood between me and a door and wouldn't move. A stupid kid, braver than he knew. He said one sentence and it undid me. What did he say? He said, I live here. Riven made a small sound, not quite a laugh. I remember looking at him and thinking, well then, so do I. And after? I left that night. But you don't walk out of rooms with no windows. You just decide the walls don't tell you who you are, and then pay for the decision with whatever you have. The waitress brought eggs like folded handkerchiefs and toast, and a small red jam in a tin eyelid. We ate because bodies demand that their debts be paid in ordinary currency, even when your heart is a casino that keeps giving away the house. He watched the window more than his plate. When a black SUV rolled in, he went still. The stillness said more than any curse. He rose as if to stretch, and his hand found mine below the table, pulling me to my feet. We leave now, he said. We left. The SUV door opened and shut. A man got out in a jacket with a fur collar, the kind of softness that announces hardness. He scanned the lot without scanning. He was a net pretending to be air. Riven's shoulder touched me, light, precise, a signal on an animal's flank. Run. We reached the car. Where? I asked, and the word fogged the cold glass. Not far, but not here. We were on the road before my pulse decided which century it was. The SUV did not follow immediately. That was almost worse. Riven took back roads, then the suggestion of a road, then the shoulder of one that had washed out long before I knew this town was mine. The fog thinned and returned like thought. In the mirror, to the left, a shape became questionably the SUV, then only trees, then something darker than trees. I did not ask if he was afraid. Fear had become a member of our small family and needed no introductions. I put my hand on his knee. He didn't look at me, but he placed his hand over mine and left it there for 3 breaths of the wipers and 1 breath of his. It was not a promise. It was a pact. We crossed the river out past the feed store, the bridge's girders singing softly in the damp, a hymn without God. When he turned onto a gravel track that hairpinned between 2 decrepit barns, I realized our route spelled not escape, but delay. We were not outrunning anything. We were asking the world for a few more minutes to be what we were. He parked behind a collapsed silo and killed the engine. The silence was immediate and thick. The rain had flattened to a whispering mist. He bent his head to the steering wheel. I counted the breaths, and they were uneven. 4 long, 1 caught, 2 fast, Then a pause, as if he were bartering with the air. I placed my hand on the back of his neck, at the soft place where men forget they are soft. He let me. This felt like a more intimate act than anything else we had done. "They'll come," he said finally. "I know." "Do you—" He stopped. He began again. "I don't deserve to ask this, but if you have to run, don't look back. Don't call my name. It's easier for me to be math if I believe you don't count me." "If I run," I said, "I will be running toward you." He made that almost smile again, the one that acknowledged both the beauty and the idiocy of being human. "It's a terrible plan. I've always been a terrible planner." "I noticed," he said, soft as fog. He leaned across the space and kissed me. It was not a first kiss that belonged to stories about first kisses. It was not all sparks and film. It was an exhausted man setting his forehead to water. It was a drowned woman learning the mouth can be a shoreline. His lips were cold and then not. He kissed me twice, then once again, as if he needed the number to come out even. The world did not broaden or narrow. It stayed exactly the size it needed to be to hold the two of us and nothing else. When he pulled back, his breathing had changed, and so had mine. The rain outside made a brighter sound against the windshield. The silence inside the car softened its edges like wool. Headlights. Abrupt, bright, indifferent as angels. They swept across the barn door and found us as easily as if we had called out. Riven did not curse. He did not panic. He took my face in both hands and looked at me for one honest second, the kind of human second that makes all the other seconds in a life both bearable and worse. "That's my last good thing," he said. "It isn't," I said, and lied like a believer. He put the car in gear. We did not race out. We crawled. Gravel spattered weakly, wet and unimpressed. The other vehicle idled at the mouth of the track, blocking an easy exit. When we drew close enough, I saw two men inside, silhouettes where faces should be, the fur collar man from the truck stop and another with a shaved head, a geometry tattoo on his scalp like a map for getting lost. Riven slowed and rolled his window down an inch. The distance there, glass, air, rain, felt like the membrane between two lives. "Evening," said the driver, voice cheerful as a pane of ice. "You seem a little off the beaten path." "Country roads," Riven said, and if you did not know his fear like I did, you would have mistaken his tone for boredom. "Place like this," the driver said. A man could forget he was expected elsewhere. The passenger leaned forward and smiled with his teeth in full retirement. "We got your RSVP." Riven's hands on the wheel looked steady. I wondered if he saw what I saw. The water pooled in the ruts. The way the barn cut the wind. The tiny triangle of space to the right where the track dipped, narrow but not impassable. "Just out for a drive," Riven said, "with my wife." The passenger's eyes cut to me then back, a measuring that left thumbprints I would later have to wash off. "Congratulations," he said. His tone made the word mean the opposite. "She got a name?" "No," Riven said. It bewildered and then relieved me. This refusal to name me, to take me into the record of men like this. My own mouth wanted to say Seren, the way a woman wants to be announced by the man who knows her. I was glad when I swallowed it. "We should be going," Riven added. Soft, polite, middle class, as if we belonged to a functioning society. "I think we already are," the driver said, smile flattening. He gestured to the right in a way that invited obedience. "Turn off the car and step out, and maybe your evening ends without incident." "Define incident," Riven said, and I breathed a laugh I couldn't help. The driver didn't. All of this, these stupid words, the rain's small patience, the rain making rings in puddles that did not rise high enough to drown us, could be put into a jar and labeled foreplay of violence. It did not matter what came next, only that it was already coming. Riven made his choice, and now the night found us. He reversed, not fast, deliberate. The other car eased forward to narrow the gap. He eased back farther. There would be no dramatic chase here within the silhouette of these barns. There would be a simple arithmetic. 2 cars, 1 narrow lane, 4 men, 1 woman, rain, headlights, a field. You trust me? Riven asked, his voice as calm as you choose to be when a knife introduces itself. Yes, I said. Then when I say run, he said, you run. Not heroically, not with last glances. You run like the lake has your lungs and you want them back. The driver rolled his window farther down, rain stippling the leather of his jacket. Cute little reunion you have going. But business has a way of asserting itself. He looked past Riven at me again, not because I mattered, but because I existed, and he appreciated existence when it could be used. Ma'am, he said, mock cordial, you should go on home. The adults have to talk, I wanted to say. I am an adult. I wanted to say, I am finally awake. I wanted to say, he is the first person who has ever let me be a person with a future and not a piece of furniture in someone else's life. I said nothing. Riven nodded once at me, the smallest nod, a tiny door opening so I could see the stairs behind it. He floored the accelerator. The car snapped forward into the narrow triangle of mud and stubborn grass to the right of the other vehicle. A place that did not deserve the word road. The tires spun, found purchase, shrieked, and then we were sliding sideways between bumper and fence post, a graceless birth. The other car lurched in surprise, tires losing their covenant with gravel. The passenger's mouth opened into a curse I did not need to hear to know. Riven's hands held us true. The barn's corner rushed, then swung, then was behind us. The field opened its arms like an insufficient savior. We fishtailed, corrected, another correct, another. I tasted iron. Headlights in the mirror grew, then steadied, then grew again. They were not fast. They were consistent, which is worse. Buckle, Riven said. I did, I said. Again, he said, and I tightened it until it bit, grateful to be bitten by a thing that only wanted to hold me. We hit the dirt track that leads to the feed store. He took it like a man who had promised someone he would make it to dinner and wanted to keep the promise. Though dinner was a different lifetime and the person had forgotten his name. The road narrowed. Trees leaned in, speaking low. Shadows patterned the windshield like a tired lace. The headlights behind us kept their distance as if they were letting us set the pace out of courtesy. The worst kind of chase. The kind that is also a conversation. We can't outrun them, I said. No, he said. But we can outdecide them. What does that mean? It means I go where they won't expect. It means we make a choice that makes no sense. Like what? Like stopping. He braked. The car slid to a muddy halt under a canopy of trees that joined their fingers like gossip. The lights behind us slowed, confused. Riven reached across me, opened my door. The rain came in like an animal with a worried face. Now, he said. We ran. The woods took us not like a mother but like an aunt who resents children but has a soft spot. Branches clawed. Roots insisted on themselves. The earth went from mud to leaf litter to something that had never seen shoes. My lungs pulled at the air like a bellows that had finally remembered its purpose. Behind us, doors slammed, voices, not shouting, talking, as if what they were doing was reasonable. Riven took my wrist, not to lead, but to remind my blood who it belonged to. We moved with that high, bright panic that makes every step a calculation made by the future about whether it will have the right to exist. The forest bowed around us. The rain smudged the edges of all things. He stopped suddenly, and I slammed into his back. What? He put a finger to his lips. He pointed. Ahead, through trees, through fog, through everything that still dared to call itself world, I saw it. The lake again, come south to find us. The shoreline had a small dock, private, belonging to a house we could not see. A weathered canoe, a green rowboat. The water looked like steel, remembering it was once a river. Riven turned to me. His face was not calm, but his fear was an inclusion, not an exclusion. It invited me. Boat, he said. Yes, I said. We reached the shore. Our shoes slid on the slimy boards. He pulled the canoe loose, the rope knot wet and stubborn. He tossed me an oar. They'll see us, I said. Then let them see the wrong thing, he said. What's the right thing? He didn't answer. The canoe groaned as it entered the water as if it did not appreciate being asked to be relevant again after a patient retirement. We climbed in. He pushed off. For a moment, we drifted. An unmoored thought. Voices on the shore, not far. The light of a phone sweeping like a lighthouse that had grown tired of saving ships. Riven paddled once, twice. Strong strokes that ate the distance between us and everything that wanted us. The fog folded around us and unfurled again in sheets, making and unmaking rooms. The rain thinned, a fine handwriting. If we go straight across, I whispered, we're exposed. We're not going straight, he said, and turned us to follow the shoreline, where reeds could be mistaken as shadows, and shadows could be mistaken as reeds. The canoe scraped once. He winced. I dug my oar into the shallows, feeling for the bottom like a blind woman learns a new house with her hands. The voices did not recede. They multiplied. Headlights now slid along the road above, fragmented by trees. The world became a layered palimpsest of light and sound and damp panic. My heartbeat found a rhythm and insisted on it. Not fast, not slow, but unauthorized. It's not far, he said. There's a second inlet. If we make it there, we can leave the boat and cut through to the highway. There's a repair yard with a chain link fence. Sometimes the padlock isn't. A sound. Not large, not dramatic. Just a small, separate splash, close enough to be private. Riven stopped paddling. I held still. My body forgot how to breathe without permission. Another splash. This one closer. Deliberate, the way a thrown pebble is deliberate. The fog thinned like a curtain opening. In the extract of gray, a shape appeared. Another small boat. Ghostly, squat. Its motor off. Its oars barely dipping. 2 men. Fur collar. Shaved head. They had found the story they were writing and were delighted to see it included a lake. Riven looked at me then. Not warning, not instructions. Not this time. Just the open expression of a man who has finally chosen ruin and would like company. He raised his oar. The 2 boats drifted in the breath length between before and after. The fog breathed with us. The rain, indecisive, paused to let the scene speak for itself. The men in the other boat did not call out. They approached without sound. There are many ways to be hunted. This one was quiet. Beside me, Riven's fingers tightened on my knee. I covered his hand with mine. The wood of the canoe creaked. Small exhalations. The other boat's prow cut a small V in the water that looked like a smile shorn of kindness. He leaned closer, mouth near my ear. It was not a whisper so much as something the night itself told me. If they ask for me, don't say my name. What should I say? I asked, surprising myself by wanting the formal answer. Say nothing, he said. The boat slid closer, and the fog opened its